We have a big update today, including all the latest NHL trade and free agent rumors, including players like Steven Stamkos, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Marc-Andre Fleury, and Wayne Simmonds. We'll jump into all the latest on these players coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, of course, I'm recording this video just a couple of hours here before the NHL draft gets underway. So if any of this information appears to have changed at all, I do apologize, but just keep in mind the timing here. I'm giving you the latest news I have as of just before the draft. Of course, wouldn't be shocking to see some of these players wind up getting traded or signed later on here in this the news cycle, is this kind of making news irrelevant very quickly. So let's dive into the latest talk here. Let's start with the news on Tampa Bay. Of course, we know they need to dismantle, shed some salary, and we're hearing that obviously the Lightning have made it known to the rest of the league. There's really only 4 players they view as untouchable, and one of those players is not Captain Steven Stamkos. They've made it known that Kucherov, Point, Hedman, and Vasilevsky are really the 4 players that they really do not want to trade, and like they're the untouchable players. To a degree, Sergachev and Cirelli are as well, because they're trying to find money to pay them and keep them around. But obviously, depending on how difficult that turns out to be, they might have to move one of them. It's just hard to say. I think they're open to it if it comes to it, but certainly not something that they want to do if they can help it. But Stamkos was not mentioned. Now, of course, he has a full no-move clause, so trading him would be extremely challenging because he'd have to agree to it. But the fact that they're willing to trade him does kind of tell a story here about where this franchise is at. Now, I've mentioned this before as well. Like, you'd have to think, after winning a Stanley Cup without him really playing hardly at all, that they kind of come to the realization, if they didn't already before, that they're an excellent hockey team even without him. And then obviously moving a big ticket like that off their cap would be huge when it comes to keeping around the rest of the players. But like I mentioned numerous times, the Lightning have given out no trade clauses and no move clauses way too easily. But you have to admit, though, and I would agree that negotiating Stamkos' contract, I probably would have given him one myself, obviously, if I was the GM. Because at that point, he's your captain. He was, top player certainly at the time. Since then, Kucherov has kind of surpassed him. Point has surpassed him. Vasilevsky, Hedman, they've all become, even more valuable to the team than Stamkos. As much as he is still quite valuable, but he's got a lot of injuries in his past now. Like I said, he makes a lot of money too. So moving him is not going to be easy, but just the fact that his name is out there is certainly interesting. And I wonder if Tampa will ever get any offers that they would consider in order to approach Stamkos to even discuss waiving or how that's going to work. So we'll see how that develops. But speaking of Tampa, of course, one of the top players that they would prefer to trade would be Tyler Johnson, who also has a full no-move clause. But apparently we're hearing that he's given them about 5 or 6 teams he'd be willing to consider being traded to waive that clause to facilitate a trade. Obviously, we kind of figured for a while now that he would likely be the first player to go once they get to that. It's just going to be difficult given all those no-trade clauses they've handed out. But Johnson's name is out there. He's given them some teams to work with, and we'll see how quickly they can find a trade. I mean, I know other guys like Alex Killorn and Yanni Gourde are certainly out there as well, and I know that they're probably going to want to get something done quickly so that they're not susceptible to an offer sheet on Cirelli or Sergachev, because they may have a difficult time matching if it indeed comes to that. So stay tuned. Tampa Bay Lightning need to find creative ways to shed money, and they need to do it awfully quick. Now, here's the latest update as well on Marc-Andre Fleury and the situation with the Vegas Golden Knights. We know that they signed Robin Lehner to a new 5-year contract, which means that Fleury likely is getting moved if they can find a way to do it. Clearly, Chris Johnson of Sportsnet has indicated he feels that Fleury's played his last game in Vegas, and that very well could be the case. Now, he has 2 years left on his contract at $7 million. Now, the problem here lies is that Vegas really can't afford to retain salary on this. They really can't afford to do a buyout because they still have a decent enough cap hit that it's not going to really accomplish as much as they need it to. So it's complicated. So what they need to do is they need to find a team to help them out like they did when they acquired Robin Lehner. They need another team to take on some salary and be a third team here in a 3-way deal so that they can, they take the salary, they get an asset or something in order to make that happen, and then they trade Fleury to another team. Now, he has been linked to like Minnesota and Pittsburgh, even Carolina to an extent, but you're looking at only a handful of teams who could really help in that regard. You're looking at New Jersey, Ottawa, Detroit, and apparently they've been offering up a second-round pick as the compensation for retaining some of that salary, and all the teams are like, that's not good enough. And I honestly, to take on $2 or $3 million, and maybe even as much as 3.5, because you can do up to 50%, that's certainly not going to be good enough. We saw what the Leafs had to do last year for Patrick Marleau to shed that salary. They had to give up a first, so I would not be shocked if one of the teams that are really looking for a first-round pick, if they have it, availability tonight, to take on a first-round selection here from Vegas. So Vegas is likely going to have to offer up a first-round pick or a really solid prospect like a Cody Glass if they really want to move this money. We'll see, but right now, a second-round pick is not going to get it done. And Vegas is going to have to ante up if they want to get this completed. Now, there's some reports here from TSN's Pierre LeBrun indicating that there seems to be a lot of interest between the Maple Leafs possibly signing Wayne Simmons. Now, apparently the Sabres have also given Simmons permission to speak with other teams ahead of the Friday free agency period when it's supposed to get underway. They used to have an interview period leading a couple days into free agency, which they eliminated this year. But the Sabres have given him consent to talk to whoever he wants about a contract. Clearly, they have no intention of re-signing him, so they don't care, I guess. But there is real interest between Simmons and Toronto. He was asked before about going to Toronto since he's from Ontario, and he seemed open to the idea. And right now, we're hearing that the Leafs are, kind of gaining mutual interest. Now, they did try to re-sign Kyle Clifford, and there's still, I guess, a remote possibility that they could, but apparently they offered him a 3-year contract at around $1 million per year, and he turned that down and has decided to test free agency. So they could bring in Wayne Simmons to be a similar type of player. Maybe Simmons would accept a little bit less money. I don't know. I certainly wouldn't go more than $1 million, especially if you're offering 2 or 3 years, especially where they're paying Jason Spezza the league minimum. I would say, $800,000 to $900,000 range is kind of all they can budget really for that kind of player. Definitely no more than $1 million. But Simmons could essentially replace what they had Kyle Clifford doing. Dubas has made it known in his immediate availabilities that he intends to make the Leafs a tougher team to play against, more physical, and certainly Simmons can provide part of that. Not quite as like he used to be able to, obviously, when he was much younger, but certainly a player who could help them get some sandpaper and going to be tougher to play against. So we'll see what else Kyle Dubas does to kind of accomplish that, but he's acknowledged that it's something that's going to be necessary to help take the team to the next level. Now, the latest on Oliver Ekman-Larsson is that Ekman-Larsson and his agent have essentially given the Coyotes a deadline of Friday to facilitate a trade out of town. So essentially, they want this done before Friday afternoon when free agency kicks in, or they're kind of saying that they're done and he'll just stay and ride things out. Now, to me, in my own personal opinion, it sounds to me that there's more pressure from Arizona to move him than there is for him to want to move. He obviously is open to it, but it seems like there's a bit of a disconnect between him and head coach Rick Tocchet. I think ownership wants to move his money because of financial constraints, and that's where the motivation comes in. So I don't think as much as that he definitely wants out of town and had enough, wants to be traded, anything like that. I mean, he's open to it, obviously, but he's only given them so many teams to work with. We're down to 2, which is Vancouver and Boston, and it sounds like Vancouver is way more motivated to do this than Boston. But it also sounds like the Coyotes seem to be more interested in what the Bruins have to offer than the Canucks, so that's why they're having issues here getting a deal done. But could it be done at the draft? It's certainly possible. Could happen shortly after, before free agency as well. Apparently, during one of the initial negotiations, the Coyotes asked for Thatcher Demko to be included in a trade, and that was a hard stop for Vancouver. They do not want to include Demko. They're already taking on a big contract from the Coyotes, so unless they're taking Louis Eriksson or Brandon Sutter, I wouldn't even consider it myself. You know that they're going to have to get some value going back. Probably like they're going to want 2 or 3 draft picks in regards to maybe a first rounder and a couple of mid rounders. Throw in like a prospect defenseman to kind of recoup what they can on the blue line. And that's probably the best I would do. But if you're not going to retain any salary, then you're going to have to take a contract back that's more value, like Sutter or Eriksson, preferably Eriksson. But it sounds like that's not something that was being discussed. But because of the OEL negotiations and this trade talks kind of ongoing, it certainly has made things more complicated with Vancouver's salary cap situation, and therefore they're not going to be able to get Markstrom and Foley signed ahead of Friday. It's extremely unlikely we see that, which means that they're very likely, especially I know I've heard in Toffoli's case, it's almost definitely happening, that he's going to be testing the open market. For Toffoli, it seems like going back to Los Angeles is a real possibility. I know his wife works in the Los Angeles sports industry as well, so it certainly would make sense from a family perspective, but I'm not sure what their options are, what they're willing to do, or where he's willing to consider and whatnot. Seems like he wanted to stay in Vancouver, stay on the West Coast, or possibly head back to California. So we'll see, but Toffoli could be another scorer on the market here, and I wouldn't rule out a return to Vancouver. It's just going to depend on when this Oliver Ekman-Larsson scenario is done, whether they complete a trade or not, and how it's going to work, and where's their cap situation, and all that. Apparently they did qualify Jake Virtanen as well, but that doesn't mean he couldn't be traded as well. We saw a couple RFAs earlier, and Max Domi and Josh Anderson be swapped for each other, who are pending RFAs who had been qualified as well. So obviously that qualifying offer will go with the player if they do get moved. So we'll see. Should be a very busy evening. We could be back with additional videos tonight on trades if they happen during the draft. And we'll be doing a draft recap here soon enough as well. So stay tuned to the channel. We'll have lots to talk about here in the coming days. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.